You're listening to the Hazard Ground Podcast, with service members from across the military sharing their stories of combat and survival. And now, here's your host, Mark Zeno.
Welcome into the Hazard Ground Podcast. Once again, we thank you for joining us each and every week. We also appreciate you being part of the Hazard Ground community on all the social media sites, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Hazard Ground Podcast. Find us everywhere. Speaking of being part of the Hazard Ground community, I want to take a quick moment before we get to this week's episode to thank our sponsors. Most of all, Amazon. This promotion has been running with us for quite some time, and it's the easiest way you can help out great veterans organizations all across America. Simple. Go to our website, hazardground.com. Click on the Amazon banner right there on the homepage. Do your normal Amazon shopping. We get a kickback from all the money that you spend from Amazon, and we donate that directly to all of the great charities and organizations you've heard featured here on the Hazard Ground Podcast. Also, check out our sponsors page, hazardground.com/sponsors, like Cabela, Moose Jaw, Knife Country USA, Patagonia. These are people that have supported us in our efforts here at the Hazard Ground Podcast. We want you to support them back. So again, go to our website, hazardground.com/sponsors, and check out all the deals you can get with our sponsors right there on our website. Reminder just to leave a rating and review on iTunes if you can. Really simple, really short. Just let us know what you think. Let us know how much you like the show, what you'd like to see changed. Also, offer up any guests that you know. Anybody that you know that you think would be a great guest on the Hazard Ground, we'd love to hear from them. So you can do it all there on the ratings and review sections on iTunes. And of course, that helps us spread the word about the Hazard Ground Podcast. Now on to this week's episode. Joining us this week is a retired Lieutenant Colonel Infantry Officer, Ranger, and Delta Force operator who had a very unique and interesting role in the War on Terror. He now owns a company called Tiger Swan that specializes in leadership. His name is Jim Reese, and he joins us now on the Hazard Ground Podcast. Jim, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Good morning.
All right, Jim. Well, look, a very interesting story as we learn more about the details of the beginning of the War on Terror, and you were right at the crossroads of it. But let's start back at the beginning and how and why you got into the Army.
Yeah, wow, geez. It's funny you should say that. Years ago, I used to say I'm never going to be one of those old guys that talks, war stories. And now I am. I'm 55 years old and I'm an old guy. And, I see the young soldiers and sailors and airmen getting on the airplanes now. And it's very prideful for me to watch them because they are the new heroes of this world. For me, though, it was, it wasn't something I had planned. I had a little brother who wanted to be an airborne ranger from the time he was about 10 years old, and he did. 17, enlisted in the Army, and he's famous in the ranger community. Me, I went to college, thought I was going to go to the NFL one day. That was a sad story.
Gee,
there.
That's funny. I had the same story. That's weird.
Yeah, that lasted about 1 week in summer camp my freshman year. When I got to college and saw these guys that were 9 times bigger than me, and I was getting my ass kicked all over the place. But I did a couple of years in college and then lost my scholarship. And my dad, went home, dad crying, ooh, boo-hoo. My dad said, hey, get a job, join the Peace Corps, or join the Army, but you're not coming home and just being a schmo. And called my little brother who was at 175 in the Rangers down in Savannah. He was an NCO and gave me the name of his recruiter. Literally that afternoon, I drove over to the recruiter's office, gave my sob story, and signed an airborne ranger contract 30 minutes later. And the rest is kind of history.
Wow.
Yeah. So I enlisted, kind of neat thing when I was at the E5 board. The battalion commander at the time was a guy named Buck Hernan, who eventually turned out to be a retired 4-star. He was the Supreme Allied Commander, and is still a good friend of these days. He said to me, he goes, hey, Jim, hey, Ranger Reese, why don't you, you've got all these college credits. Why don't you become an officer? And I told him, sir, I hate officers. I don't never wanted, I kind of drank the Kool-Aid of the Ranger enlisted Ranger NCO. And then about a year later, he came back to me and he got me a deal where I was able to go back to the same school I had. And his close friend was the commanding general of 28th Infantry Division, which is the Pennsylvania National Guard. So the bottom line is they got me a deal where I was able to go back to school. I was able to go active with the Guard, with the Lurch unit in Pennsylvania, which had a bunch of old Rangers in it too, including my brother. Why I did that, and then I spent a year back in school, got my degree, and then they commissioned me. So I did a bunch of years in the Rangers as a enlisted NCO, and then commissioned as a second lieutenant in the infantry, and then went back to the Rangers.
What time frame is this year wise?
So 1982.
Okay.
1982 is when I enlisted, and then went back to school in 88, and then got commissioned in 89.
All right. So this is even before Desert Storm.
Oh, absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
I mean, as Desert Storm is starting to gear up and everything else, I mean, what's going on in your career, and do you end up over there in Saudi Arabia, Iraq area?
No, we don't. That was devastating for the JSOC community, and especially for the Rangers. One company went, Kurt Fuller, General Kurt Fuller, good friend. He took his company at B Company 175. And to be very candid with you, I'm trying to think where the heck I was. I might have been in 275 at the time. I'm trying to think. I don't know, but we did not go. I was in the Rangers, but only one company from the Rangers went for Desert Storm, and a small slice from JSOC went, which, as you can imagine, was pretty disheartening for the JSOC community.
Yeah. Well, but you guys did get your opportunity in Somalia, in Black Hawk Down, as it's more commonly known, Mogadishu. Did you end up there?
Correct. Did not. Did not. Missed that one too. Matter of fact, I was at the advanced course as a captain, getting ready to come back to the Rangers, so I missed that one.
Wow.
Yep,
so you're 0 for 2 at this point.
0 for 2 at this point. Really got hot and heavy for me when so I went back to the Rangers, then got recruited for Delta.
Okay.
Went through assessment selection for Delta. That was a whole interesting aspect there. It was a great time, but the deal was the Delta was starting to do really for the first time, and this was an initiative by General, at the time was a guy by the name Major Tony Thomas, who's now General Tony Thomas, the commander of SOCOM. He started an initiative to start recruiting heavily for officers in Delta out of the Ranger Regiment, which had never been done before. Yeah,
because don't you typically have to have your tab before you can go Delta, your Special Forces tab?
No, you don't.
Okay.
You either had a Ranger or SF.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And to be very candid with you, you didn't have to even have a tab. You don't have to. They recruit. Delta recruits from the whole entire Army. Great story I love to tell about Delta. One of my OTC instructors, who was famous, long gun guy, sniper, he got recruited from the 82nd Airborne as a crane operator.
Wow.
He was a heavy-wheeled mechanic crane operator out of the 82nd Airborne. Went to recruiting, went to selection, made it, and then Delta put him through, I think, Ranger School, the Q course, and all that. But again, the way Delta recruits, they're really looking for, someone with this very, interesting psychological profile. And he was a guy who fit that. And again, spent 20 some years in Delta and was famous there.
Jim, you don't have to go into specific, but what are some of those traits that they're looking for? Kind of give me some adjectives to describe it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's very interesting too, which I was lucky to very kind of understand some of those traits, with all the years I went through. So, one of them is you get a lot of folks that are very individualistic, and not in a bad way, but guys that are kind of loners, the primary, profile is not someone who you think is the quarterback of the football team, and rah, and big groups. And, where you see a lot in the Rangers, Delta's really the complete opposite.
So you're not looking for gregariousness.
No, we're not. Looking for guys that are quiet, underneath the radar screen. Definitely A-type personality, but guys that are musicians, artists, rock climbers, guys that like to fish, that like to, hunters, guys that are out there on their own. And really, I mean, they truly are the Jason Bournes of our society.
You know, it's weird because what we know about the military and the Army is that everything is about the guy next to you, right? It's always about the team. It's always about a group effort and everything else. And this is so counterculture to what we know about the military, but yet that makes sense because to do what Delta operators have to do, you're basically operating alone 99% of the time.
You're right. And I'll tell you, when I was in the Rangers in my early years and early as an officer, I'd watch the senior NCOs go away to selection. And and again, I didn't know much about it. I mean, the Rangers were very close to Delta and we trained together and all these things, but you just didn't know the secret sauce. And I was surprised at the Ranger NCOs that wouldn't come back. And the ones that did come back, again, I'm thinking, I mean, I can think of 3 right off the bat that went to selection multiple times. They were physical studs. Some of them got hurt, but now when I see them, they were, the middle linebacker, the quarterback. They were at the Rangers. They are famous. I mean, and unbelievable Rangers, unbelievable soldiers, but they were just kind of missing some of those pieces that the Delta, and remember, this profile's not, people just don't pull this out of their ass. This is 37 plus years of psychological profiling,
right? And
the psychologists that work at Delta that literally shape what a Delta operator looks like. And it's very interesting. And so, through the years, I'd see these guys come back and was shocked, but until I got there, then I realized it. But I would even tell you, my personality, if you looked at a scale of 1 to 10 was the profile, and 5 being that sweet spot, I was probably an 8 or a 9. Well, I know that for a fact. I was on the high side of the profile. I enjoy being by myself sometimes, but I'm still kind of the team ball player. And there was a story. I had a command sergeant major who in my troop, first name Mark, and the Delta guys that hear this will know exactly who I'm talking to, was again a very famous Ranger. But I remember years later, I asked him a question. I said, Mark, I always wondered why we do all these things and we'll sit around, we'll have a couple beers afterwards, but then boom, everybody takes off, and we don't really hang out. We're in the Rangers, the platoons hang out together, families hang out together. I mean, it's just a big family community. And he kind of looked at me as we're drinking a beer and he turned to me and says, "Hey, sir, remember, eagles are not a flocking bird." And I kind of sat there and looked at him. I said, and it kind of went bing, 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 because, everyone else calls us eagles. When we get on the helicopters, you'll hear the task force guys say, 5-1 coming out, 8 eagles on board. And it really hit home because that's what we are. We're eagles, and eagles are not a flocking bird, and we're individuals. And after 9/11, when we kicked off really in Iraq, it was the first time that we really went out and fought sustained wise as a squadron.
Really?
Yeah. Somalia, we went to Panama, a squadron went. Somalia, a squadron went. But they fought in troops. But in Iraq, we fought pretty much for the first time for long periods of time as a sustained operation as a squadron.
Now, what was the philosophical change in that? Was it need-based, mission-based? What was it?
Yeah, absolutely need-based and mission. JSOC, Delta, the tiers inside JSOC, there's the mantra of JSOC says,
yep,
we will become what you need us to be. And, after 9/11, the ability to deploy squadrons with a task force headquarters and bring this entire task force of JSOC forces, not only to Iraq, but to Afghanistan and other places in the world, that we started building these task force to do manhunting and start, hunting Al-Qaeda and these other transnational terrorists, became critical. And so we had to reshape and revamp our operations and our task organization.
Now, Jim, let me ask you, I mean, the knee-jerk reaction is, I think that's a force multiplier, right? If you take an individual who chews gum and kicks ass religiously and another individual who chews gum and kicks ass religiously, and you put them together, you would think that you would have a lot of chewing gum and a lot of ass kicking going on. But was that the case when you guys first started operating together? Because it almost seems like you're looking at two north ends of the magnet that would repel each other.
Well, I mean, you hit a great point there. Let me put it this way. Think of yourself as an officer in an organization like that. So here I am. I'm a troop commander, right? Mm-hmm. 35 E8s and E9s, maybe a couple E7s. And I'm the one officer in the room. And oh, by the way, when I first took over, I had a year of, OTC training under my belt. And now you come in and now you go to an operation in the Balkans with your troop. Talk about a leadership challenge when you're not the smartest guy in the room. Used to be the guy who was tactically and doctrinally sound and you take input. Now you're the guy that now you've got a bunch of sergeant majors, a bunch of E8s that have 10, 15, 20 years in the same organization, have been all around the world in combat operations from Beirut, Somalia, all over the world. Very challenging leadership operation. And at times can be challenging to get that organization to move in the same direction. Yeah, that they do.
I mean, again, if you have an individual who likes to do things one way and an individual who likes to do things a different way, when you put those two together, they're probably going to butt heads. So I can imagine the challenge of getting everybody on the same page to do things one way.
Well, there's a reason why the troop and squadron sergeant majors in Delta are probably the most powerful NCOs in the Army. They're selected. There's only a couple of them, in the troops and the squadrons. There's only a couple of them. And those guys, when they are selected, are powerful, smart, intelligent. I would tell you that every sergeant major that I had that I worked with in command across the plethora of Delta, all of them could have been colonels at that time. You could have put Eagles on their collars, and you would not have known the difference.
Amazing stuff. All right, let's get to the war on terror, because 9/11 happens. Where are you, both in your career, physically, and everything else? Give me the background.
So 9/11 happens, and I'm the deputy commander operations officer for a new organization we're building called Advanced Force Operations, AFO.
And this is within Delta at this point.
It's a JSOC, JSOC Delta SEAL Team 6. It's a little bit of a blend.
Gotcha.
We're gonna call it a Purple Task Force, and JSOC is out conducting a big training operation, the JRX, and it's really the validation for the AFO concept that had been going on for about 6 or 8 months, and we are spread throughout Europe doing a big JRX, and I'm actually in the embassy in Budapest, Hungary, getting ready to go into a briefing with the COM JSOC and the ambassador of Hungary, U.S. ambassador to Hungary, to brief him up on this training scenario. And what we're doing is we're tracking transnational terrorists through Europe and Russia that are supposedly bringing nuclear rods into a harbor in Eastern Europe that they're going to transload onto a ship and then move them to China.
Why does this sound like a James Bond movie?
Well, it is.
Oh, okay. All right. Just checking.
It really is. So unfortunately, we're sitting there, and one of my communicators comes running down the hall and grabs me and says, "Hey, boss, you need to come see this." And I run back down the hall, and we're seeing pictures of the World Trade Towers. So I run down and jump in the room and grab the commander of JSOC and the JSOC command sergeant major. We walk back down. He jumps on the red phone, which is a secure comms back to SOCOM and JSOC that we have set up. And he talks to a guy by the name of General Holland, who is the commander of all U.S. SOCOM, and pretty much, told him, he says, "Hey, General Daly, get your guys back, get back as fast as you can, index the operation." And then he turns to me and the commander of AFO at the time and says, "Hey," because remember now, we have folks spread all over Eastern Europe and Western Europe, right, all over the place, doing reconnaissance, surveillance, in a training mode. But we got folks spread all over Europe. And he just turns to us and says, "Hey, we had a Sabre squadron with us. We had C-17s there. The JSOC staff came over. So he says, hey, I'm going back with the squadron. We're going to fly back right now to the U.S. Get your guys home. Get your folks home. And so they took off, and we got the message out. We just told everybody, stop what you're doing, collect your stuff, figure out a way to get home. Now, and I'll tell you, that's the only organization in the world where you put out your guidance is get home. That's it. There were no questions. There were not like, should we fly? Should we drive? Should we swim? Should we take a boat? It was just, roger that, sir. We got the mission. We'll get home. And for me and my team in Budapest, it was planes, trains, and automobiles. We couldn't get flights out.
So when you say home, you mean back to like SOCOM and
back to Fort Bragg.
Okay.
To Fort Bragg.
Gotcha.
Get home. Get back to Fort Bragg.
Gotcha.
So for me, it was couldn't get flights out, commercial flights, because we came all in commercial. Couldn't get flights out, so we took a train to Vienna. Tried to get to Vienna. Flights still were canceled. Then we took a train to Paris. Did Paris for a day. It was the Griswolds. It was a Griswolds vacation. It really was. I'm trying to remember if we flew out of Paris. For some reason, I recall, but I might be wrong. I think then we jumped a bus to Brussels. And then from Brussels, we were able to catch one of the first KLM flights into, I think it was DC. Or it might even be might have been JFK. Can't remember. But then we got back to the States, got back to Bragg, and then we kind of sat around waiting to figure out what was going to happen.
So when do you find out exactly what happens, and what are you told?
Actually, it's 2 days later. Everyone's going stir crazy at Bragg. I went for a run. I was hot. I remember it was hot. I came back in my office. I was sweating, and the JSOC commander, the Delta commander, and a couple other folks were in my office, and they said, go home, pack your bags, bring your kit, bring your suits. The plane's waiting for you. Fly to DC. Go see Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. They have a mission for you.
Wow.
Yeah, that's what I said.
That's
okay?
pretty daunting.
Yeah, and I was a major. at the time. So I went home. Told my family. Said, "Hey, I'm out of here. Don't know where I'm going." Grabbed all my stuff, and I went to the Fayetteville airport, jumped on one of our planes, flew me up, and, it's kind of a blur now, but next thing I know, I'm in the secretary's office, and I walked in, and it was the secretary, the DepSecDef Wolfowitz, members of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and I'm in a suit, and the secretary says, "Hey, are you the Delta guy?" And I said, "Yes, sir, I am." And he says, "Do you know why you're here?" I said, "No, sir, I don't." And he says, "Well, the president has given the mission to invade Afghanistan to the CIA." He says, "You know who George Tenet is?" I said, "Yes, sir, I do." He says, "Your job is to go bridge the gap between the Department of Defense and the CIA and work for George Tenet."
Wow.
Well, and my pause was just like I was there. As I'm looking at members of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, 4 stars. There was probably 134 stars in the room when I was there. And I kind of just nodded my head. I said, "Okay, sir." And then inside I was going, "You've got to be kidding me."
And so you're going, what the hell is he talking about?
Well, I did. And so I said, "Okay, sir." And he literally said to me, "Do you have any questions?" I said, "No, sir." He says, "They're waiting for you up at the CIA." So I literally got in a car, brought my stuff, got to the CIA. A couple of security officers came out and said, "Are you Major Reese?" I said, "I am." They said, "Welcome." They grabbed my bags. They brought me up to the 7th floor. And every night at 5:00, Secretary Tenet had what he called his principals meeting around the big table on the 7th floor of the CIA. And I walked in about 15 minutes, about 5:15. And I mean, every principal from this, it was daunting. And so I walked in, a guy stood up and literally said, my new nickname for the next 6 months was the Delta guy. This
Not very creative.
Yeah. This guy walked up to me and says, "Hey, are you the Delta guy?" I said, "Yes, sir, I am." He says, "Hey, your seat's next to the old man right here." And that guy was a guy by the name of Buzzy Krungard. He was they called him the exec. He was a close friend. He was very multimillionaire, very famous businessman. And George Tenet had brought him in kind of to look at the CIA from a business perspective. He was a very interesting man. And I sat down next to Tenet. He leaned over to me, had a big cigar in his mouth, and he says, "Are you the Delta guy?" I said, "Yes, sir." He says, "You know why you're here?" I says, "No, sir." He says, "I've been told to invade Afghanistan. I have no idea how to do it. You're going to tell us, you're going to help us make a plan and help us do this thing."
Oh, you're kidding me.
I said, "Yes, sir." And that was it.
Now, when you hear that, there's two reactions to that, I think. And let me just kind of give you the unassuming. One is, holy crap, what the hell am I getting into? And the other one is, I have such a how do I put this delicately? I've got such a military kind of, oh God, let's forget. I've got a military boner for this whole thing, right? Because this is the coolest damn thing I've ever done.
Right.
So which one was your reaction?
Number two.
Okay.
I mean, one, I was very humbled. I was very humbled. It was a great opportunity. I'm a major, but now literally, I understood the friction, at the national command level. I understood that friction between Tenet, Rumsfeld, and what was going on. Our country had been attacked, and I was chosen to represent JSOC and Delta. And I understood my mission. And that's why I was selected, and other officers and senior NCOs, in Delta, why they're selected to go do these things throughout the history of the unit, not just now after 9/11. I mean, there have been guys in my places down in Colombia for the Pablo Escobar, in the Balkans, Somalia, and classified operations throughout the world. This was just, another milestone for Delta and for JSOC. And so I was very humbled, but I was fired up because now I understood what was going on, but I also knew this was an opportunity to help me shape, a strategic national event that I knew the CIA was going to need our help.
But Jim, that underscores it. You're shaping the history of the world. Like, did you know that at that point in time?
I mean, as you say it now, sure. No, I didn't know at the time because there's a focus, there's a mission.
Right.
So I'm not really worried about the history books. What I'm really worried about now is president's the president's given a mission, the CIA is going, we're going to support it. What's the best? And what I knew is, what I think was the reason I was selected is my personality could bridge the gap and break down walls between these two organizations. And remember now, I had a lot of experience in the Balkans and the Colombia operations. We worked closely with the CIA. So at the tactical level, I knew a lot of the tactical and operational level. I knew a lot of those case officers, ground branch case officers that we'd be working with. My job now is to ensure when I saw things that strategically JSOC and Delta could do for the CIA, that I could figure out a way to not seem like, to literally, I hate to say this, be a business guy and sell our capability and get us involved to make sure everyone's doing well.
All right. So you take the job of basically forming the invasion of Afghanistan. Now, I'm just curious. We don't get into Afghanistan until the beginning of October, if my memory serves me correct. I mean, did you spend that time shortly after 9/11, that whole month, kind of putting that whole plan together?
Well, again, not me, assisting.
Well, yes, okay, assisting.
Yeah. So you had the group, which was called the NALT, the Northern Alliance Liaison Team, that was led by some very, very competent CIA case officers and ground branch officers. And, we started making a plan how to get them in. And and remember, a lot of these guys had lots of experience from Afghanistan during the Mujahideen time,
Sure, yeah.
So,
did you meet with a lot of resistance from people in Washington? Like a lot of the political guys, or no?
Yeah. I mean, I didn't have to deal with the political guys. Was there resistance across the spectrum of the interagency? Yeah, absolutely. There always is. I mean, that's.
But was that resistance to the plan, or just resistance to kind of, this director and this director not getting along?
more at the strategic level. At the tactical level, I'll call it the interagency. At the tactical level, interagency, the FBI, CIA, DOD, NSA, everyone figures it out. They really do. But at the director level ships, at senior leadership where there's budgets involved and who's in charge and who's going to get the credit for it, that becomes ugly, if that makes sense.
Oh, I can only imagine the egos that are clashing. And what's frustrating is you hear this, right? And now we have the benefit of hindsight, but you hear this, and I can only imagine what was going on the ground for people who are in combat, guys like, me and everybody else who were sitting there with a rifle in their hands, waiting for a decision to be made by two egotistical guys who were really kind of in a you-know-what measuring contest.
Well, I would tell you, all of them at that level, all of them are what's the best way to describe that? I would say all of them are good folks. Everyone's trying to do the right thing. They're all trying to do the right thing. But when you get into a group and, our bureaucracy kind of drives this individual aspect, Now, once we got going into Afghanistan, Iraq, and some of these places, the beauty of the interagency worked. It worked because we were forced to work now. But it took a little bit to get going. There was some friction. But once it got going, and boy, I'll tell you what, in Iraq, 2004, 5, 6, those days were, you talk about a clicking interagency operation between, because at that time, everyone, people said, you're in charge, we're all here to support you, and I don't have to go call Mother May I to get permission to do it. We're here, and who's ever in charge, whether it's the CIA, FBI, DOD, that's who was in charge, bottom line.
All right, Jim, take me back to the initial invasion of Afghanistan. When this whole thing is going on, where are you? Are you kind of watching this thing unfold? Did the plan you guys put forth go as planned?
Yes, it did. The Northern Alliance liaison team with a couple of unit guys that went in with them. It worked like a champ, and history shows that. History shows that the NALT teams got in. They made the coordination with the Northern Alliance. One of the key members right off the bat, who is a key member in Afghanistan right now, is Dr. Abdullah, who's the CEO of Afghanistan. He was, one of the number 2 advisors to, the Lion of the Panjshir. That's who the teams met with. And at the same time, he had the Green Beret, the Special Forces teams. They went in and infiltrated, the guys on the horseback. And, it was perfect. It worked like a champ. Like I said, history shows that right away, that the initial stages and the initial takedown of Kabul and Kandahar worked like a champ. It was a great plan.
Wow. Are you... I don't know if you can answer this, so if you can't, that's fine. Are you at this time directly hunting Osama bin Laden? Is that part of the goal?
For the task force, for all the elements, the counterterrorism aspects, yes. Getting Osama and understanding that, and I'll tell you, and through the years, the ability to manhunt. The manhunts were always focused at the top. Now, years later, as we started to get better and better, and refine our techniques of manhunting and bring in technology and all these other types of intelligence, we started to realize is, hey, just don't focus on the top guy. Start ticking away at the bottom.
Right.
The network, because a top guy's got a network. So you fight a network with a network. But initially going to Afghanistan, everyone was focused on trying to find Osama bin Laden and capture or killing him.
Okay, so this is the end of 2001 into 2002 that we're in Afghanistan.
Yep.
Now, I've read a couple of books and done my homework on how close we were to actually capturing Osama bin Laden then. And a lot of people may not know this, but we were danger close. Like, we literally had him to a point where he needed help to escape back into Pakistan. And so as this is happening and we realize that we have him and then we lose him, what is the level of frustration that when that happens?
It's very frustrated. The guys on the ground up at, Tora Bora.
Yeah.
Again, you started to get some friction. There's folks from one side that say, hey, let's just go, air assault, a Ranger battalion on the mountains of Takugar at 15,000 feet, and people aren't and this is the beauty of JSOC, and unfortunately, there are constraints and limitations put on your forces, especially when you start using technology and machines like helicopters. And some helicopters are not very good at, flying at 15,000 feet with 10 or 12 PUAs on board. So those factors, for a lot of guys that aren't used to doing that, those factors are kind of wished away, and then when it can't be done, it frustrates people and you start to get friction.
Yeah.
It's a tough fight. I mean, people didn't realize what it's like fighting all day, every day in the Rocky Mountains at altitude. So the aircraft, bombing these positions, what Dalton Fury and his teams were doing up there in Tora Bora, fighting their asses off. And like you said, you read the books. I mean,
yeah,
it's nothing new. It's just frustrating. It became frustrating.
And Jim's talking about Dalton Fury was a Delta Force commander on the ground in Afghanistan, 2001, 2002. He wrote a book called Kill Bin Laden. And in that book, he succinctly says that he details how they had Osama bin Laden captured. They knew his location. They knew where he was. They wanted to go and get him. But basically, because we had to put an Afghan face on this thing, a Northern Alliance face on this thing, you had two warlords fighting over who was going to be the one to go in there and actually grab him. And in the meantime, while they're fighting over this, bin Laden gets help from the Pakistanis to slip out the back door. But Dalton Fury also asserts that part of the reason that we weren't able to capture him is because the request for more forces, ground forces, was denied. Now, you had said that you had gotten all the support that you needed. Did that change at some point in time?
Well, you also got to remember that, by that time, and no disrespect here, but you started to now move from a soft-centric fight.
I know where you're going.
Now to some conventional forces and some great conventional forces. 10th Mountain Division, is now on the ground. Now CENTCOM is starting to, because, remember now, 9/11, soft forces are used to going in and getting out. Get in, get out, get in, get out. And now we're learning about how to do sustained warfare. And now strategic level planners are starting to say, hey, can we really leave JSOC and all these Green Berets in for a year, 2 years at a time? And again, we are now changing doctrine on the fly. We really are.
And that's a dangerous spot to be. It's not, danger might not be the right, it's a difficult spot to be, and it's hard to navigate because you've never had to do it before. And sometimes you don't know the limits of what you're capable of in those scenarios, and that's where it becomes dangerous.
Yeah. And, you've got leaders, you got senior leaders. And again, everyone is trying to do the right thing, but this is a type of warfare that, it's not chess. Okay.
Right.
It's like, it's like playing arena football. Okay. It's fast. It's furious. You got to be thinking 3-4 steps, ahead, and, working through our MDMP that we learn, officers learn, and, CGSC, it's too slow. It's too slow. And so SOF is very good at that, but now you start to get the clashes of civilizations when you start bringing more of the conventional staffs and forces in.
Yeah.
And again, guys all trying to do the same right thing, but they're not used to the assets that we bring to the fight. Now you're trying to deploy conventional helicopters who have never flown in this and flying at night. and brown out and all. I mean, literally, we're learning to fight a new warfare against a elusive threat that, blends in with society. I mean, we are literally learning to fight as we fight. A new warfare.
Just an anecdote to that for those who listen and those who may not be military who are fans of the podcast. I don't think civilians, in particular politicians, ever really bothered to grasp that challenge in combat. This was such a different war for us that we had never fought, even for the conventional forces, right? Because this was guerrilla tactics all the way. I mean, the way we fought in Iraq and Afghanistan, these weren't guys wearing a uniform we all knew what the bad guys looked like. We were learning a lot of things on the fly, and the cost of learning those things and changing tactics and techniques along the way means the loss of lives. And to people who wear a suit every day and go to work in Washington and civilians who watch the news, all you see is the end result. You don't see the process. And when you lose that process, the end result ends up taking a bigger picture or a bigger kind of idea than what it really is. For us, it's callous to say it's the cost of doing business, because when civilians hear that and politicians hear it, that's not what they want to be able to tell their constituents, right? It's not just the cost of doing. Those are human lives. Those are fathers. Those are brothers. Those are sons. Whatever they may be, and they can't accept that. But we understand the nature of the cost of doing business because it's our business, and no one understands our business except for us.
Absolutely, But then let me swing that back the other way, and I'm fortunate to have been able. I mean, to me, this was, I'll use the term acumen. My not only my military doctrinal acumen, but my ability to understand our nation's interagency. I mean, it was like going and getting 5 MBAs at the same time.
Wow.
For me, and so I'll swing that back to, you're right, guys like me and you and all the other leaders that are, and former leaders that are listening to this, about the human capital and the loss of lives and what we, our job is to protect those people. But at the same time, our national level folks are starting to think about, because I remember the discussions. Hey, just bring all of SOF over here and we can do this as a SOF-centric fight. Okay. But then what do we do with all the guys that are looking at the Chinese and Asia, all the folks looking down at Latin America, all the guys watching Russia and, and these guys, all those soft forces that are centric to that and speak these languages? Are we just going to throw, all these years of doctrine out the door to fight this counterterrorism fight? And, guys tactically said, yes, absolutely. But then strategically, you've got to look at from a national level, and all the way up to the POTUS says, I have to protect my back door too. That's why our armies and, we have the Pentagon, the guys that, and discuss these things. And so at the tactical level, it gets frustrating and there's friction between the tactical and the strategic guys. But I would tell you from that year, 10 months that I played in this, and was side by side with all these other folks, both conventional and soft, CIA folks over there in Afghanistan. Boy, I tell you, people were working their butts off and learned a lot. They really did.
Jim, when you reflect back on it, now coming up nearly on 20 years later, what could we or would we change? What could we do different? Would anything have netted a different result?
One, we've learned it's really probably if we could have pushed more soft forces in to integrate with the Afghans, because the Afghans had to be part of this. They really did. And that's what we've learned now. I mean, everything we're doing now, even at the JSOC level, the direct action guys, we're doing things, we are doing things, with the locals. You've got to do it. So, I think of, going into Takugar with Operation Anaconda, with the 5th Group guys, that small element of 5th Group and trying to work with, that battalion of Afghans as they came around the whale. Should we have, should have, would have, could have, the old thing. Yeah. But there's limitations on everything. And at the end of the day, people are our most important aspect of everything we do. but people are the smallest minority on the warfare aspect that we have.
You were close to getting Osama bin Laden in 2001, 2002 in Tora Bora. It takes us another 10 years to actually kill him. Two-part question. One, did it bother you that it took so long? And two, was the effort to capture him the second time, was that a better effort than the first? I don't know if I phrased that correctly. I mean, was it harder to do it the second time around, do you think, or the first time?
One, I was already retired. Second, though, I mean, one, I was happy for SEAL Team 6. Happy for JSOC. I'm happy for the nation that we were able to get this guy. For me, it was a little bit. I think any tier 1 guy between SEAL Team 6 and Delta, there's a little bit of angst. I know the guys would have loved to gone after him, but I would tell you, people have asked me this. SEAL Team 6 were the right guys to go after it.
Why?
When Iraq started to spin up, Delta was pulled out of Afghanistan and told to spin up, and we started concentrating on Iraq, and with that, I mean, Delta became literally the subject matter experts of Iraq. And SEAL Team 6 at the time, weren't happy about that because everyone's chasing the next shiny ball. And SEAL Team 6 was said, okay, you guys stay and you now develop Afghanistan. And I think that was a letdown for them initially because the focus got taken off Afghanistan. But I give SEAL Team 6 all the credit in the world. They learned that environment better than anybody. And they learned to start blending and looking at different ways of infiltrating. And they did an incredible job over there. I give them all the credit in the world. And so when it was time for the JSOC commander, even though it was Admiral McCraven, to make a determination who was going to go, it was a no-brainer. I mean, those guys knew the environment. They knew what they were going after. They knew the target better than everybody, and they were selected. It was the right decision to make.
Jim, I know tactically and operationally, we are a better, stronger special operations force now than we were prior to the war on terror. Like we've just had to, because we've become so adaptive. We've learned a lot more. As you said, we can sustain special operations forces longer than we typically have before. But that came at a cost. It came at a cost of, one, there's a lot more notoriety to what you guys do now. People know about it. They want to use it. And two, there is this overwhelming sense that, well, just send those guys in. They'll just, take care of it all. And it's almost like they have to be the tip of the spear for everything. And that's not what you guys were before. Only in certain cases you were. It's not now that the beginning of every fight starts with SOF forces going in. So with that being the case now, are SOF forces and special operations better now or worse or indifferent? How do you label them?
A little bit of both. Yes, the special operations forces in the United States are the premier, the best forces globally, bar none. They are, I mean, it's a combination of the New York Yankees and, who are the Kansas City Chiefs right now. I mean, it's the best. I mean, they're incredible. They're incredible what they can do. I see the guys now. I mean, my company's in Syria, supporting humanitarian and stabilization operations, doing demining and the security for that, and working with this, the Syrian Kurds. And I'll see the special operation forces over there, and guys that I know, guys that are in command were buddies of mine. And when I see them now, the technology, what they're doing with the local forces, the integration. I mean, it's incredible. It is really incredible what these forces have done. And, the thing that I really take, I mean, even myself, I mean, I can't even count how many rotations I had because it really doesn't matter. But I mean, these guys have literally spent decades now in war.
Yeah.
Decades at war. But that's also tough. It's tough for these guys. Now, one thing I think our special operation forces have lost, and I can't speak for the SEALs from their old days, but I think from the Green Beret and from the Delta aspect, the individual aspects that Jason Bourne, remember we talked about early on about the profile. Boy, I tell you what, I mean, when I got to Delta, I mean, some of my senior NCO, the leadership, some of the missions that they had done as singletons or as a two-man team, I mean, they're right out of a James Bond or Jason Bourne movie, right out of it. And you sit there and read the history of what happened and what they were doing. You're like, holy shit, that's pretty impressive, you know?
Yeah, and I think is it because of the need? They needed more special operators that they had to kind of open the doors a little wider?
Well, and again, I mean, special operations started recruiting more. And everyone knows when you start recruiting more, faster, more people out there, people will say we're not reducing the standard. And I'm not saying we're reducing the standard, but I think what starts to happen is that profile starts to widen.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yeah,
starts
absolutely.
to widen. So if you've got, if you're between a 1 and a 10 profile, now that profile might be between a 1 and a 15, and so, I mean, it's going to happen. But we got to get these forces out there.
Does it bother you that the clandestineness, if that's a word, the ability to be cloaked that was there before is no longer there?
I'm not going to say it's no longer there because it's still there. I just think what you've lost is some generations of experience. I mean, there's still some experience there. And I know that especially us, we've captured those experiences, and, we know how to, if need be, bring back folks that have those experiences if need be. And, I can just tell you this without really getting into it. Through the years, people have identified that and captured it and tried to get it. But I really think what it does is, I mean, even in the Rangers, in the Rangers, I talk about this all the time. The days of me wearing, just in garrison, starched fatigues and spit shining my own boots and shaping my own beret and cleaning my room, and buffing the floors, that made me into the soldier I became.
Sure.
We don't do that anymore.
No.
We don't spit shine boots. We don't press our, we don't, I remember I was proud. I used to get my buttons in my OG 107s, and I had the pockets sewn down. The guy starts the shit out of those things so they could stand up, because when we were in garrison, we were in garrison and we were proud. We went to the field. We were dirty, nasty, camouflage, and we were proud. And there's something to be said about some of those old time soldier skills that our soldiers today don't learn anymore. There's kind of a discipline factor, and I hate to say it, but maybe even an entitlement aspect per se.
No,
if that makes sense.
You're not wrong, and maybe it's just because we're old. That's the reason why we do it differently. But let me pivot to a minute to leadership, because that's your expertise now. Did we learn anything about how to make better leaders of people who don't wear the uniform? Because I feel like through all this and what you're telling me is that you guys were the right guys for the job that you were asked to do. You had the leadership skills, you had the tactical and the operational skills, even the strategic skills to handle the mission. But you're working with people who don't have that same skill set, and politicians and people put a suit on every day. Are those people better leaders now than they were years ago because of the interaction with the military?
Yes, they are. But there's a but to this.
I knew that's what I was waiting for.
Yeah. Yes. So, the military, and especially, folks that are selected to work in the interagency, even if they're conventional guys, and there's a lot of folks out there, if they're selected or they go, the foreign affairs officers and the JSOC guys that are out there in the interagency, what they really bring is they bring this mission focused and an ability to plan, and it goes all back to, the one thing I think that I brought to a lot of folks is how to conduct a good old mission analysis, or the business world will call it a SWOT analysis. But what I've been able to show is if you do a great mission analysis and really dig into the elements of the mission analysis, that's all you need. Because then you take that and you can quickly then put an 80% plan together and get out there and move. Because whether you're in the military, the interagency world, or the business world, once first contact, whatever that is, whatever first contact is, the plan changes. So you got to be able to pivot,
Yeah.
So yes, I think one of the buts though that us military folks don't get, and especially I see it out here in the business world now, all these guys want to come out and go, hey, I'm going to save your company. I'm going to teach you leadership and how to do all this stuff because I'm going to take you from $100 million to $200 million company. And I call bullshit on that. I really do. I call bullshit. There are basic leadership skills that we can teach, but now when you're in a political arena, when you are in a business arena and have to think about all the other operating environments in a business that we don't have to worry about in the military, kind of like payroll and insurance and all these type of things that the big government takes care of us for us. We're kidding ourselves if we think our leadership skills we learn at the NCO academies and the staff colleges are really going to turn the tide. They can help, but there's a constraint to it also because we don't know some of those other factors that are out there.
Well, and that's where I guess your company, you're the founder and chairman and CEO of Tiger Swan, kind of bridges that gap. Am I wrong in that?
Well, we do. I mean, but I would tell you that, and I speak about this a lot, 10 years now of starting from scratch, my own company, by myself and my first partner, started this thing. And now 10 years, if I could go back and be a captain, lieutenant colonel, what I know now, I would literally change a lot of things, decisions, ways I led, and decision-making. I would change that way now. I would change that, knowing what I know now from a business perspective.
That's interesting because a lot of people who look back on their career don't have those kind of, I guess, clarity in their decision-making process, like they just assume that, look, I did it the best way I could. I gave it my best effort and there's not much I would change, maybe a decision here and there, but you seem to indicate that there would be a paradigm shift in how you operated.
Well, operationally working in the military, one of the biggest lessons learned I would take out is when we go in to work with a local force, an indigenous force, whatever you want to call it, we kind of kid ourselves that we're walking in and we base everything off a military model, or there might be some a law enforcement model that goes along with that also. If you're working, like Afghanistan, the Afghan National Police, or local police and all that, but everything's driven by this military concept behind us. What I would challenge folks is in the military now is and that's why in the military, sometimes we send people out for a year and they train with industry, which is very interesting. You go out and train with industry for a year or two, then come back. It's because just like we say here in the U.S., politics, stability, security is local. It's all local. And even the militaries in a lot of these countries, it's a business. There's a business behind this thing. And when you're running a business, there's aspects of contracting, budgets, who are the power players in the industry. You got to know those things, and you got to know how to work through them and work around them. And you just can't use your good old military foundations and culture to power through those things, because it really is a business dynamic that's out there.
Kind of a reflective question, if you will, when you look back on everything that you're a part of and see the way the world is now, do you ever kind of look at it and go, damn, I had a big, big role in this? I look back on my experience in Iraq, and I think I changed lives, but at a very small bottom level. The Iraqis I work with every day, I think I impacted their lives in a positive manner. I hope I did. but that doesn't have a grand scale. Some of the things that you were operating on were very grand. Do you feel like the impact you made was what you wanted?
Personally, no. Personally, I feel that I was part of a team, that made a huge impact. And I really do. Even though, for a while, I was an individual. I was the only guy up there working it. But I had a lot of folks behind me, helping me, supporting me. I could pick up, I'll give you a great example. When Hamid Karzai, who turned out to be the president of Afghanistan for years, needed to be reinserted back in Afghanistan, and the CIA wanted to reinsert him. They didn't have the airlift to do it, and I was able to pick up the phone. I heard, I was just in a meeting. I was just listening. I was a little fly on the wall. I pushed my toe. I breached every meeting I could get into. And when I did that, I heard them. They're having this challenge. How do they get Karzai back in and where to go to him? And I picked up the phone and I had a direct line in the director of JSOC. And I said, "Hey, sir, we could win big points right here if we could take some of our aircraft and support them. And I could turn to them and go, we'll help you right now." And he turned to me and said, "Jim, they talked about it. Got a quick phone call back. He goes, 'Jim, make it happen.'" And I walked back in that meeting and said, I waited. The CIA guys, the case officers are all figuring out how to do it. And I go, "Hey, JSOC will help you. We'll fly you in." And they kind of turned and looked at me kind of in shock because now, we're supporting them. And it was a huge, something as little as that was a huge win for the interagency community because it showed that we had assets. We're not gonna take our assets and run away and be the snobby boy in the corner. Hey, we've got assets. Yep, you've got the mission. We'd like it to be us, but what can we do to help? We're all one team, and that was a huge impact. But there were a lot of people behind the scenes that was part of that impact.
Well, Jim, I'm literally in awe of everything that you were a part of throughout your career. I've learned so much from this podcast, really. There's a lot to digest for our listeners. And I think when we talk about impact, you certainly had that throughout your military career, and certainly with a high profile, high level job that not many people knew that you did. You absolutely made the most of it, as you said, but it was a much bigger part of a much bigger effort. And what can I say other than thank you, man? It's been a learning experience. It's been incredible. And certainly just good luck with Tiger Swan. Keep doing what you guys are doing. And God, thank you so much.
Mark, thank you very much. And I'm humbled that you guys had me on today. And I appreciate what you guys are doing for the veteran community and keep up the great work. And the folks who you've had previously on there with me, they've all had a great message. And thank you for everything you do. I appreciate it.
Jim Reese, thanks for being part of the Hazard Ground.
Yes, sir.
You've been listening to the Hazard Ground Podcast, hosted by Mark Zeno and produced by Matt Pasquarella. If you have an interesting story to tell and you'd like to be on the show, send us an email at hazardgroundpodcast@gmail.com. And if you like the show, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.